This video is going to show us another way to model fractions. Let's put the date at the top as well as the topic. The topic for the video today is modeling multiplying fractions 2. Our essential question for the video will be, how can we model multiplying fractions? We've already seen one way to multiply fractions with models, and let's just do a quick review of that strategy. Let's say we want to find 1/4 of 2/5. Remember that the of is a clue word that tells us that we need to multiply. We can use the brownie pan model, also called the area model, to display 1/4 times 2/5. Go ahead and start to set up your model by making a rectangle. And use your model to display 1/4 of 2/5. I'll be using two different colors as we've seen before. So go ahead and pause the video, get what you need to be set up, and then when you have modeled 1/4 of 2/5, unpause and we'll see how you did. How'd you do? I broke my section into fifths, horizontally in red, and fourths, vertically in blue. The sections where they overlapped, there were 2 squares, and there were 20 total spaces in my area model. So I got an answer of 2/20. Of course, that can also be the same as 1/10. In addition to the brownie pan or area model, there's another way we can model this. We're going to give that a try, and we're going to use a different question to get us started. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my page here. In this question, we see that Sean runs 1/4 of a half-mile relay. The question will be, how many miles or how far does Sean run? We're going to use something called a thermometer model this time. In my thermometer model, I've drawn a rectangle that is going to represent 1 whole. So this represents the whole mile. Sean's team is running just a half-mile. So I'm going to cut the thermometer first in half. I'm going to use a different color here to mark the half-mile. Of course, Sean's not running the entire half-mile. He's running 1/4 of the half-mile. So when I look at my half-mile here, I need to break that into 4 parts to show what Sean is doing. So I'm going to break that using my blue pen into 4 equal sections. Of those 4 sections, Sean is just running 1/4. So I'm going to mark this off with my blue pen that he's running this 1/4 of the half. But now as I look at my thermometer, I notice that all of the pieces that I've made are not all equal. I have 4 equally sized pieces on the left and then 1 big chunk on the right. When I'm talking about fractions, I can't do that. They all have to be the same size. So I'm going to take my pen here and cut my other half just the same way I cut the first half, just so that they're all equally sized. I see now that when they're all equal, there are 8 equally sized pieces in this model, of which Sean is just running 1 of them. He's running this section where they overlap here. So Sean is running 1/8 of a mile, which means my number sentence was that 1/4, the part that Sean ran, of the 1/2 mile was 1/8. And that's the thermometer model. Let's try it a few more times just to make sure it makes sense. We're going to use the thermometer model to see what 1/3 of 1/3 would be, or 1/3 times 1/3. I've started with my thermometer. Our first job is to cut it into thirds. Right? So go ahead and cut your thermometer into 3 equal pieces. Now we want to take 1/3 of the original third. So I'm switching colors here, and here's my original third, This time I want to take a third of that. So I'm going to cut that into 3 pieces and mark off one of those since I'm looking at 1/3 there. But then I realized that my fraction pieces are not all equal, so I need to go back through and cut these also into thirds so that they are all the same size. The part that is overlapped, where I see 1/3 of 1/3, is right here. It's one section out of a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sections. So 1/3 of 1/3 equals 1/9. This next one's going to look a little different, but it's the same basic idea. Let's try it this time with 1/3 of 2/5. Notice this time the numerator of one of my fractions is not 1. As you're getting your thermometer model ready, think to yourself how that might change what we do here. We want 1/3 of 2/5 this time, so it's a little different than before. However, I am still going to start the same way. I'm taking a fraction of 2/5, so I need to start by breaking my thermometer into 5 equal sections. Go ahead and do that. Since we're taking a fraction of 2/5, I'm going to shade in 2 of my fifths this time. So that's a little different than before. We want to take 1/3 now of each of the 2/5. So I'm going to break my section here into thirds, and I want 1/3. But I don't want just 1/3 of that fifth, I want 1/3 of 2/5. So I'm going to do the same thing again here and take 1 of my fifths. Now, of course, we remember as we look at this that we can't just cut part of our thermometer into pieces. We have to make sure they're all the same size. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the same thing here. Cut these into 3. Now I have all equally sized pieces, and I can look for where the overlap occurs. It happens here and here. So there are 2 sections that represent 1/3 of 2/5. And altogether now, if I count all my pieces, there are 15 total sections. So 1/3 of 2/5 equals 2/15. Let's do one more. This time we want to find what 2/3 of 4/5 would be. This time neither of our fractions has a 1 in the numerator, so that's the little twist on this one. But same as before, go ahead and set up your rectangle for your thermometer. Our second fraction here tells us what we're breaking up first. We have 4/5. We want 2/3 of 4/5. So I'm going to break my thermometer up into 5 equal sections. This time we want to look at 4/5. So 1, 2, 3, 4 of our fifths. And this time we want to find 2/3 of each of the 4/5. So I'm going to break my first fifth into thirds and mark off 2 of them. I'm going to do it again with my next fifth and mark off 2 of them. The next one, mark off 2 of them. And one more, my fourth one, mark off 2 of them. So I've marked off 2/3 in each of the 4/5 that we're looking at. Of course, we know that we can't leave this guy by itself, right? It has to be broken up into the same pieces, but I'm not going to shade anything in. When I look for the parts where they overlap, that will tell me the product of 2/3 of 4/5. If I count that up, there's 2 in each of these. There are a total of 8 that are colored purple, and it is 8 out of 1, 2, 3, 15. So 2/3 of 4/5 equals 8/15. And there you have it. That's the thermometer model. So our essential question was, how can we model multiplying fractions? We had already seen before an area or brownie pan model, and now we have a second way, the thermometer model.